Hey there, folks. Welcome to another edition of the Processing Blue podcast.
That was quite a pause after the hey there, folks.
I mean, it felt like a dramatic... let me get into my spiel here.
Okay, sorry.
Anyway, welcome to another edition of the Processing Blue podcast. It's a Panthers podcast, so if you like the Los Angeles Chargers, you're probably in the wrong place. That said, you should probably stick around because my producer, Zach, just shot me a weird look. And he probably doesn't want me telling you to go somewhere else. Anyway, the guy heartily laughing.
There we go.
Across the way is Panthers beat reporter Alex Zietlow. I am your host / Panthers beat reporter / failed comedian Mike Kaye.
You're not failing, dude. You're making me giggle.
I feel like I'm like dinner theater where they only serve spaghetti and meatballs level comedy right now.
Don't you dare bash on spaghetti and meatballs.
I'm not. I'm bashing on my performance.
Okay.
It's probably and the meatballs are probably really small. Anyway, I digress. There's some glee in the air this week as I have spirit fingers kind of moving. I don't know where that came from. I am from New Jersey, so I talk with my hands. But anyway, wow, we are taking up a lot of time on this. As Zach is running out of patience. Training camp's over. Last week of the preseason, third week of the preseason, the Panthers have not played their starters. Dave Canales says that he is open to playing the starters, but oh wait, there's a huge catch. If guys are injured and they can't stack the deck like they normally would, maybe they don't see a big point in rushing Bryce Young or some of these other players out there, want to protect him. The injury bug is very much real. We've seen that from the first two preseason games. With that said, though, the final cut is a week away. We are recording this on Tuesday, August 20th. The cutdown deadline is at 4 p.m. on August 27th. With a week to go, including the preseason, including practice, Alex, what do you have to see from this team that is plausible, right? Like, you can't be like, Bryce Young is a franchise quarterback. There's no way to factor that in. But what realistic outlook do you want to have when this week is over and the cutdowns begin?
Well, four things. Number one...
Four things? I asked for one, Zach.
Well,
that's not how it works.
Yeah, this isn't how it works, but four things. One, joy is always in the air when we're speaking to Dave Canales. That dude has a love of life. It's remarkable. I mean, we sit through a preseason game against the Jets where the Panthers scored their only touchdown at the very end when they rushed the ball 7 straight times, and he storms into the post-game press conference and goes, "Wow, that was fun, huh?"
And then the guy that scored it immediately gets cut a couple of days later. Because touchdowns apparently have been outlawed by the Panthers.
Okay, well, no, but that's not the point I was trying to make. The point I was trying to make was he literally sees the joy in everything, and honestly, it's pretty cool. It's pretty refreshing.
Yeah, I know another guy like that.
Yeah, well, who is he? Okay, I'm kidding. But I do have 3 legit things that I want to see this weekend, and I'll go through them quick. One, I want to see a touchdown pass from Bryce Young. Okay. That's it. That's what I want. Well, that's not it, obviously, but that's a simple premise. Have Bryce drop back. I don't care if it's play action. I don't care if it's out of the shotgun. I don't care if it's out of the pistol. Word to Frank Reich. Find a touchdown pass. Let's start with that. 2, I want to see a touchdown drive that takes less than 8 plays, because last year the only touchdown drives I think we saw were double digits, and most of them were 17 plays for something like 60 yards or something like that. The yards per play were abysmal. And 3, and I think this one is more what you were trying to get at, if I'm a Panthers fan, I don't want to see Ihmir Smith-Marsette taking reps at the end of the game. I think that his status as a member of the 53-man squad kind of got called into question last week when he was playing really late. He was basically out there for the final drive, and he's a guy who's the number 1 punt returner, number 2 on kick returner. He showed a lot of explosiveness last year on this painfully predictable offense a year ago. I'm someone who's really high on him. So, and I think a lot of Panthers fans are too. And so I think that it would be good to see him getting the rest and getting that sort of, I don't know the proper word, respect of not playing on the final series. And that would kind of assuage any Panthers fans' fears of him not making the 53-man roster. So those are my things. I want Bryce Young to throw a touchdown pass. I want to see a quick drive, and I want to see ISM on the sidelines, safe. So when the 53-man comes, he's safe there as well.
So, Zach, I gave Alex a couple of guidelines, right? It had to be plausible.
Oh.
Which I don't know that any of those things are plausible if Bryce doesn't play. And I said one thing, but I will give you one thing. And I think that I was the most encouraging practice that I've seen just in general was actually today on Tuesday.
Oh, fascinating. Tell me.
I can't get too much into the weeds of it because we're not allowed to report strategic stuff. But I'm wondering if it's because like all the noise and the fans and like the bleachers that look like they were from a Sugar Ray concert in the 90s and all this stuff wasn't around and you could really tune in. But it feels like the concepts that this offense is running are marrying together. And there's logic to what's being done. Like, you can understand why A leads to B, leads to C, leads to D. This offense has a structure. It's not just like a hodgepodge of concepts. There are concepts that I'm seeing married, which make a lot of sense, and I think inevitably could work once the talent meets the scheme. And so what I want to see is more of that. I don't want this to just be like we're going to be at Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday's practice. I want to see the cohesion of those steps continued Wednesday and Thursday. And I don't think they'll show it a lot in the preseason because that's just not what you do. But if those continue to be married together and you see it in week one, I think there's a lot of logic behind what Dave Canales is trying to accomplish, which I couldn't say about the previous offense, where it felt like every week there was something new or different. And so to me, today was a step in the right direction for not leaps and bounds, but from a noticeable like stride. And I think, okay, I kind of get it.
Did you ever feel that way last year? In the preseason, in training camp?
No, not really. I remember being in the Giants press box. Like, you know when, like, Deadpool or, like, in Modern Family, they stare at the camera and they break the third wall? I was looking for, like, an avenue where I could break the third wall because I was the only beat writer in the area that was like, is anyone
clocking this?
Yeah, like,
totally.
You know what I mean? Like, you know, I just felt like I was, like, you know.
Yeah, no, I get it. Also, The Office, John Krasinski, who plays the character Jim, does that masterfully. Okay.
Yeah. Anyway, speaking of the preseason and all the stuff, I think one of the biggest topics right now is cornerback, right?
100%.
Lamar Jackson was waived injured on Monday. He was obviously in the running to be that fourth or fifth corner, along with DiCaprio, Shutter Island Boodle, and Deshaun Jameson. Right now, Dane Jackson is set to miss over a month with a hamstring injury. They brought him in to be the presumed number 2 cornerback. Right now, you're looking at J.C. Hornet as the number 1 cornerback. We knew from a talent perspective he is leaps and bounds better than the rest of the room. Troy Hill is this guy who's a dependable nickel corner, but he can play outside. Shaw Smith-Wade, the 5th-round pick, is learning how to be a little bit more versatile. He was an outside corner in college, learned how to play nickel at the Senior Bowl. Awesome story on that on the CharlotteObserver.com, by the way.
Woo!
He is kind of being pushed into a position where if Hill starts on the outside, there's a potential for Shaw Smith-Wade to start at nickel. He's played very well at outside and inside. I think that's kind of tricky because he is so young and is learning the other position. And then you have Shutter Island, you have Deshaun Jameson, 2 guys who've competed really well, but ideally they're 4th or 5th corners who are mostly standouts on special teams. They will add to the group at the waiver wire. What's your overall take on corner?
Well, I think you really beautifully and succinctly kind of summarized that group well. I think the thing for me that is interesting is this safeties room is really deep. You put out a report, I think yesterday, or maybe it was the day after the preseason game, that was basically like, or maybe it was in your mailbag this morning. This safeties group is really deep, and there are more than 2 NFL starters in the safeties room. And that's something that I don't think any other room in this Panthers team can really say, which I think is interesting. I asked Dave Canales today at today's presser what his evaluation methods are when trying to take a safeties guy who is a star of the defensive backfield and trying to move them to corner. Is there any possibility that, say, Damani Richardson can move from a safety to a cornerback or maybe a nickel position? Tried that with Jeremy Chin last year in Evero's system. That didn't pan out. But there's got to be a way to utilize these like really good safeties. Alex Cook had a really good training camp this year. He made plays in the first preseason game. He led the team in tackles. You got Jamie Robinson, this guy who led the team in tackles this past preseason game, and who was a draft pick last year, who's in the safeties room, and he's competing with other really talented safeties. What do you do with that room? I think that is an interesting question when trying to figure out what to do with the cornerbacks room. And I'm curious to see how you think the safeties and cornerbacks room kind of come together.
Well, I think they'll keep 10 DBs off the jump.
Okay.
I think that keeping 5 corners and 5 safeties at that initial cut down makes sense. So you look at Horn, Hill, Shaw Smith, Wade, Shutter Island, and Deshaun Jameson. So those are 5 corners. Lamar Jackson would have been one of those 5 had he stayed healthy. I think we can both say that pretty comfortably.
Yeah, for sure.
At safety, you're looking at Xavier Woods, who's got a groin injury.
Mm-hmm.
Nick Scott, who's seen as a third starter. Jordan Fuller, who's a full-time starter. So it could be Nick Scott and Jordan Fuller starting against the Saints. Alex Cook, like you said, he's the personal protector on special team, on punt coverage. That's a really important job, and one that I think doesn't get talked about enough. It's an important job internally. Then you look at, so that's 4 guys, right?
Yeah.
So that 5th spot, is kind of interesting. You've got Damani Richardson. You've got last year's 5th round pick, Jamie Robinson, who can play nickel on occasion. They started him off there, but Shaw Smith-Wade is very clearly higher on the depth chart than him. I think with Hill potentially playing outside, it might make sense to have Jamie Robinson be that initial backup nickel.
Mm-hmm.
It also stops you from, exposing him to waivers. He's also a guy that could probably easily be cut to make way for a waiver claim. Damani Richardson's really interesting. I think if there's 2 undrafted free agents that you really need to, pay attention to over the next 2 days or next week, it's Damani Richardson and Jalen Coker. I've been less impressed with Coker than Damani Richardson, but I think Damani Richardson's made enough plays where you say, this is a guy you want around to develop and you don't want to risk him to waivers.
Yeah. And then, of course, there's the Sam Franklin of it all.
Yeah, so here, let's talk about PUP and IR really quick.
Cool.
So this year, the NFL implemented a new rule where you were allowed to place 2 guys on injured reserve and designate them to return off the jump, right? Mm-hmm. They have to be done at the cut down deadline on that wire, on that transaction wire. It used to be back before this year where you would have to keep all of your injured players on the 53-man roster for 24 hours and then place them on IR to have them eligible for designated to return. This way, instead of cutting 2 extra players who you might not want to lose at the 53, you can now place 2 guys on IR, which saves you 2 spots in theory. The PUP list, there are only 3 guys that are eligible for that. That's Yosh Nijman, DJ Wanham, and Amari Barno. That's it. Those guys would miss the first 4 games of the season if they got put on the reserve list. So that's 3 spots right there. As of now, it looks like that's going to happen. The non-football injury list, Jonathan Brooks, kind of a similar thing. IR, let's say there's 5 guys that they think will be out for 3 to 4 weeks. They're going to be able to put 2 on IR, then they're going to have to hold the other 3 and cut 3 guys to make that happen, and then do the normal 24-hour rule. It's going to be tricky. And that's what's going to be very hard to figure out when it comes down to the numbers game, because the initial 53-man roster is literally going to last like 16 hours. Because at noon, you're going to have all the waiver claims, and you're going to put together your practice squad, and then you're going to have to put guys on IR. So there's going to be a lot of motion, and the Observer's going to have you covered with a live blog.
Heck yeah.
Both days. Anyway, talking about concerns about injuries, what is the position you're most concerned about entering this final week of the preseason?
I mean, it's the cornerback room. I hate to just take the low-hanging fruit, but outside of J.C. Horn, there's just not enough coverage firepower, so to speak. The defense has done a really good job of turning the offense over this preseason, though. I will give them that. And obviously through training camp, Trevin Wallace is a guy who's come up with a lot of interceptions, really leveraging his coveraging. The defense is getting a lot of attacks on the ball, which is important. I mean, we've asked Dave about this. He is hoping to see 60-plus attacks on the ball during practice. And that's during limited 11-on-11 series scrimmaging. And that's like 3 or 4 attacks on the ball every practice rep in 11s. And then he also said that you would need 100 attacks on the ball during a game to get 1 or 2 fumbles a game. And that is what the Panthers are trying to coach this year. And so the coaching is clearly there in trying to figure out how to get more turnovers. But at the end of the day, you need to have the talent to do so. And you need to have the playmaking ability to do so. And I think in the cornerback room, outside of J.C. Horn and Troy Hill, it's kind of lacking. What about you? What is your most concerning position?
Well, I think pass rusher, right? I mean,
Sure.
It's a similar situation to corner.
Can I just stop you? It's so fascinating that we're talking about defense on the most concerning thing when the defense was so good, but continue. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not as concerned about corner just because Evero's system's so DB friendly, but like from a pass rush standpoint, Jadeveon Clowney's really the only proven guy. Like, I mean, it's similar to J.C. Horn. Sorry. Zach is... Yeah, I mean, I wish you guys could see Zach. He is very funny. Anyway, so what I would say...
Wait, did you mention Jadeveon Clowney?
I did. Yeah, it feels like we could do a drinking game out of it. But anyway, we're a PG show, as everyone knows. But look, Cam Gill's back. He's got a club on his hand from his broken hand. Caleb on Chason's basically switched positions with him where he's out. DJ Johnson's good against the run. Iku Leota's fine as a pass rusher. Nobody's got a complete game outside of Clowney, and that's a concern because the waiver wire historically is not great for edge rushers. You can talk about how you have the first claim priority. The pickings are going to be slim because teams don't really just drop good edge rushers on rookie contracts, and in order to be eligible for the waiver wire, you have to be on your rookie contract essentially. So that's tough. I would give it an honorable mention to tight end. Tommy Tremble hasn't really stood out since returning, but then again, they're trying to onboard him. Dave Canales said their process has been great. Jatavian Sanders has flashed a little bit, but I think it's still going to take some time. He's getting noticeably better as a blocker. Ian Thomas is also injured. He could be a guy who's eligible for that IR stint. Jordan Matthews has really had a nice camp. I just don't know if it's enough. I also would be concerned if he made the 53, I would almost surely think that he would be cut to make room for a waiver claim, and that's a tough position to be in because I do think he's played well. I think he deserves to make the roster, but he's also in his 30s, and there are guys who are probably more talented out there who have more upside. And so I think, that's kind of a tough beat right there. But what isn't a tough beat is I put out an article recently on CharlotteObserver.com, a wonderful website.
Wait, which one?
CharlotteObserver.com.
Woo!
Or, if you're into the app stuff, we also have an app. So
that's cool.
And we have a newsletter, that we just started that you should sign up for. It's at the top of all of our articles. Yes. Really cool stuff.
Yeah.
Twice a week, Alex.
For free, Mike.
For free. You don't even have to be a subscriber.
Okay, hold on.
Although Zach would prefer you be one. All opinions made up about Zach are not a reflection of the Charlotte Observer.
We're having way too much fun today.
Yeah, it's been a good one. Anyway, well, you guys can actually be the judge. Leave us a comment. Leave us a rating. Well, actually, don't. Not after that open this time.
Well, or send us an email. you know.
Send Alex your emails. He'll definitely read them. So speaking of guys that are big winners, let's nominate our biggest winner of training camp.
Okay.
Who do you got?
It is so funny. We were talking about how concerning the defensive positions are, and now I'm going to give my MVP to an offensive guy. Do you have
Is that funny?
It's not.
It seems kind of presumptuous.
It's not
Zach.
funny, haha. It's like, oh, that's interesting.
It's like the way Alanis Morissette uses the word ironic.
Well, she uses it incorrectly.
Well, yeah, I mean, but funny. I mean, doesn't that mean humorous?
Okay, Mike, do you want to guess who mine is?
And
And no, it's not Jadeveon Clowney because this is an offensive player.
Oh, whoa.
Drink.
He doesn't have his cup. Anyway, I'm gonna guess it's gonna be a wide receiver,
Yes, it is.
and he's gonna have an M in his last name.
Uh-huh.
Oh my gosh, the suspense! Because see, there's two guys that have that.
And two of them are pretty deserving.
What do you got?
Jonathan Mingo.
Boom!
Okay.
Or Johnny Mingo, if you like Tombstone.
Jonathan Mingo's just played really well. I'm glad we built it up that way because I don't have a ton much more to say. I've already talked about him a ton this preseason. He's just solid, and he's running around, and he's just having a redemptive camp. Or he did have a redemptive training camp. He had another couple good catches today. He and Bryce seem to be on the same page. Can't talk too much about strategy like Mike said, but I mean the way that they're using Bryce seems to align with how they're going to use Jonathan during the season. Give me Jonathan Mingo, man. Your MVP, Mike. Do you want to do some?
No, I'll get to it. It's BY9.
Woo!
I think he has improved as a passer. I asked him about it today. He really gave us like a non-answer, like the gee golly, I'm just trying to get better sort of thing. But I think he's looked exponentially better as a thrower to his left. I think he's done a really nice job on fade balls. He's tested himself in tight windows. I think he looks like he's in rhythm and control of the offense. It seems like the concepts are matching his talent level and what he can provide. I think they talk about quarterbacks making other guys look better. I don't know if he's necessarily made everybody look better, but he's looked everyone look competent, and that's all you can ask. The rest has to be on the talent of the other guys. I think Deontay Johnson and him have a wonderful connection. We've seen that he and Adam Thielen haven't skipped a beat. I think he and Terrace Marshall and Jonathan Mingo have a connection that they absolutely did not have last year. But I also like when there are guys like Jordan Matthews in there, or Amir Smith-Marset, or David Moore, that Bryce is having little issue getting connected with him. I think he's consistently made some really good plays. I think that the Jets practice was incredibly encouraging with his ability to protect the ball and also make impressive throws. Look, I'm not going to knight the guy as a franchise quarterback. I'm not going to say he's better than 10 to 15 other starters. I'm not going to do that. But I think this was a step in the right direction, not just from like a run-of-the-mill, like, hey, it's year 1 to year 2 sort of thing. I think he has genuinely grown as a player. I don't know if he's been the best player in camp, but I think the biggest win for him is he makes the offense look succinct and like in sync and just flow. I also think, whether it was intended or not, Andy Dalton not playing a lot this summer has also given Bryce the room to look like the best quarterback on the field at all times. Yeah. We all know what Andy can do from a distance throwing thing. That's just not Bryce's game. He can throw for distance. We've seen some pretty impressive throws downfield, but I think Bryce is really taking it upon himself to be an on-field leader. As I click my wedding ring on my glass. Shout out to you, honey. That I'm sure you're totally listening to this podcast. As you juggle our two kids. Wait, I should disclaimer. No kids were thrown in the air in the process of making this podcast or this day. Excuse me.
Oh my goodness.
But what I would say is, like, I think what's encouraging is the offense is marrying into what Bryce does, and he's got room to kind of improvise, but he also has room to have a cheat sheet as well, and that's encouraging. Look, I don't know that this offense is going to set records. I don't know that they're going to light the world on fire. This is not going to be an aerial sort of fireworks show. But I do think they'll be competent, and I do think they will give other teams a run for their money. They will find weaknesses in defenses, and you won't be embarrassed going to see this team's offense the way you were last year. Now, that said, I still, we'll put out our final predictions next week, but spoiler alert, I don't have them winning a ton of games, but I do think this is a good building block year. Yeah. And I would say within the last 3 weeks, I've been more encouraged by Canales than the entire offseason prior, whereas last year I was really encouraged by OTAs and minicamp, and then from there it was just a complete mess. So I think that trajectory is a lot better this year than last year. Again, I wouldn't get your hopes up. This team isn't going to be contending for the playoffs, in my opinion, but seeing Bryce Young take a step in a new offense that clearly is tailored to him makes me a little bit encouraged heading into the season.
And there's only really one way to go, and it's a total net yards per game, 265.3 yards a game, last in the league. Points per game, 13.9, last in the league. Passing yards per game, 161.2, last in the league. Mike's saying that he has seen a lot of good things from Bryce. I have seen it as well. And yeah, there's only one way to go, and it's up.
Yeah, unless you talk about the sack numbers. But I think they can do without 60-plus sacks this year. Yeah. But yes.
No, I agree. Mike, really good stuff. You want me to count us out?
Send us home.
Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing.
That's a wrap.